Do you sometimes wonder how you could truly have an impact when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? How do you know you are moving in the right direction when it comes to becoming a more inclusive individual? As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod brings topics such as ethnicity, genders, sexuality, religion on the table. We talk about research and science, but also emotions, feelings, and vulnerability. We discuss allyship, advocacy, privilege, but most importantly, we talk action. Because without action, we stay still. And when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, stillness is never the answer. Welcome to As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. In this episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod, I have the pleasure to welcome Jason Butler. With 20 years of executive leadership experience, Jason is now a keynote speaker and business consultant, helping executive leaders expand their influence and leadership capacity through the power of compassion and servant leadership. Jason has a master's in Intercultural Studies, a doctorate from Duke, and was a McLauchlan Leadership Fellow in the NC State MBA. He lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, with his partner Andrea and their 7 kids. Welcome to another episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Welcome to another episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Today I have the pleasure to welcome Jason, and we're going to have, I think, a great conversation. Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
I'm very much looking forward to our chat today and to recording this episode with you. I think we're going to learn a lot of stuff, so I'm very excited about that. But in my usual habit, I'm going to ask the first question of the podcast, which is, Jason, what's your story?
Yeah, well, I everybody's got a great story, and mine has pieces and lovely pieces, hard pieces. I am a Southern guy from North Carolina, grew up here in the South, and it kind of life, split parents kind of molded me. I'm the first of 4, the oldest of 4 kids. My mom was a single mom working tons. So I grew up fast, so to speak. I was taking care of my younger brothers and sisters at a young age and became an adult, maybe a little bit too early, but when, that's the way life is, right? And went off and felt like I wanted to be a pastor. And so I wanted to be in church. So like I dedicated my life to that. The first part of my life in college, do that. I was worked with orphans in Russia and got out of everything, moved to Wisconsin. Like, so here's a Southern guy moving to Wisconsin where it's just cold all the time. It's just cold. And there, my life began to really transform in a sense of being in a very urban environment that is so much poverty. And so I really began to kind of see the world in a different way, out of my comfort zone, seeing the world like, okay, well, my purpose in life is to help other people. So I really developed this sort of sense, but also really learned and developed so much about justice, about social and economic justice, about sexual justice. It's like, how can I in this person be an influence and a force for good? So I got into community organizing. I founded a few nonprofits that were meeting need. We had just an incredible sort of organization that engaged race and economics and gender and all these things coming together and really be a force for good and a force for justice. Moved back to North Carolina. Cold got me, and moved back to North Carolina about 5 years ago, and just love being back. And did another church here, very progressive organization. Got into politics, and now I sort of had a midlife career shift. Decided, like, you know what, I want to do something else in life. I don't want to do just one thing my whole life. And so currently what I'm doing now, I was in a startup for a little bit, a food tech startup, but COVID it's hard to do food in COVID. And so that's there. Maybe one day we'll get out of COVID, maybe not. And so maybe this thing will work later on. But right now, I'm really kind of taking all my leadership experience. I've spent 20 years in leadership in community-facing organizations. So really helping communities of people, thousands and thousands of people, navigate really difficult social barriers and helping people find solutions to those. And one of my fundamental philosophies in life, there is a solution to every problem. We just have to find it. We got to figure it out, but there's a solution to every problem. And so what I'm doing now is I work with executive leaders in corporate and businesses to really help them embrace servant leadership, belonging, and emotional intelligence. I mean, like COVID has changed the leadership game forever. And employees have so much more power. And so like the principles that I was using in my community facing organizations, now the business community is embracing. And like, okay, we need something. We're lost. The old models of profit over people and just innovation is not working anymore. We need people skills. We need emotional intelligence. Where are we? And I'm like, hey, hey, I've been doing this for a long time. I can help. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I just had a book come out. It released today, actually. It's called The Village Mindset. And so all these principles I put into a little book. So that's my story, a little bit of my story.
Wonderful. And thank you very much for sharing that. And I was about to ask you about the book, actually, because I knew it was coming out this summer. So it's a good day to record today, but we can come back to that. And so as you mentioned, I mean, belonging comes back regularly in some of the things we've discussed in the past, and you've already mentioned it a few times. And it's a big part of the work you do. But funnily enough, it's becoming a buzzword a lot. So before we move on maybe to where we are now with that word, I wanted to ask you, what's your definition of belonging?
Yeah, absolutely. Belonging to me, belonging is all about how someone feels, right? So it's based in feeling. And so that makes it difficult. It's a little bit hard to get a grasp on, like, what is belonging? And so really it's all about the other person. Like, do you feel like you belong? And what I do is I have three categories of belonging. Do you feel seen, known, and valued? And so those to me are the three components of belonging, to where people can see you and your value and value you. And so it's all about the feeling. So do you feel like you're seen, known, and valued in your organization, and in your family, in your organization? And so they're like, hey, yes, I do, or I don't. And what's really interesting about belonging is two people in the same organization, one can feel like they belong and one can feel like they don't belong. And so like, it's always this shifting ground that we're always having to work on.
No, definitely. And one of the things that I found very interesting in what you just said as well is that we talk a lot about belonging in the corporate environment, but actually you mentioned already, there's the family, there is community we're in, there is any group we may feel we belong or we don't belong. And what I love about that as well is, and I think one of the principles of why I put this podcast together is, how can we make a difference as an individual? There's a lot of work that can be done at a corporate level, that's for sure. But every single one of us can do something about creating some of that diversity, creating that inclusion, and all the way to creating that belonging.
Yes, absolutely. That's great.
And so you mentioned that you've been in leadership for the last 20 years. What have you noticed has changed since when you started, when it comes to belonging and when it comes to some of these principles in organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the belonging work really kind of flows out of the DEI work. And so that, I think 20 years ago, as I was in it, like DEI, or, we can call that different things by different names in different places. But really, are we going to value diversity as a good in our organization, like a good thing in our organization? And so when I think about DEI, when I talk about DEI, and I'm a huge DEI advocate, And so like to me, like there's two ways to approach DEI. I see corporate doing two ways, right? One way is kind of like the way. It's like, hey, we need to be more diverse because like, well, socially we just need to be more diverse, right? And that's what social values want. Like that's that's not a reason to be diverse. You're just checking a box, and this is going to bite you later, like because you're not ready for this. The real, what I love to see leaders is to say, we're not capable of succeeding because we don't have diversity in our organization. And the only way we're going to succeed is to have different voices, different experiences, different wisdoms, different viewpoints of the world around our table, so that when we have to make really difficult decisions, we get the full spectrum of humanity coming in and making this decision. Then we can make the decision properly. Then we can succeed. Like that to me is like the power of diversity. And so I tell folks, right, like if you're just a bunch of white guys, middle-aged white guys sitting around a table making decisions, like you're going to fail because you don't know the experiences of other people in other places. You only have one experience. So okay, so now we have that, right? And so like that's coming. The DEI work is coming, but that wasn't there. That wasn't there a long time ago, 20 years ago when we were just starting. And so it's so good to see it come out. Unfortunately, it's had to be pushed. It had to be almost like labor, right? Like forced into the consciousness of folks, unfortunately, but it's there now. It's getting there. And so belonging now is kind of like back onto that as people realize, okay, well, this takes more than just, hey, we're going to hire some diverse workforce. We're going to have the mindset, the fundamentals to go along with that in order to help people feel like they belong. Because that's and so like to me, I tell people, I think the nonprofit world was way ahead of the game, and like corporate was behind the game, and they're just reacting. Nonprofit is where, in church, like I tell people sometimes, like, you know, when you're in a corporate arena and people talk about DEI, everybody's soft and like, well, yes, like they don't always tell you the real feelings. I worked in a church, and let me tell you, people, like they will tell you what they feel about the world. Like you don't even have to ask them. Like, here it is. They're just gonna like throw it up on you. And so like that's the place that I work and really honed my leadership skills and the way that I see the world. And so like what I've seen the change is from the nonprofit and the church world into the corporate world, which is a weird sort of you wouldn't think that that's the way. Usually things start in the corporate world and they work their way out, but this way it worked in the other way.
And maybe we're moving a little bit into a side direction here, but I have a question I want to ask because I'm fascinated about that, and it's regarding you're talking about the church and this whole diversity and inclusion and belonging that is behind. Sometimes from the outside world, we don't necessarily see churches being the most advanced when it comes to that inclusion, especially on certain topics that maybe go against beliefs that are there. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, actually, because for me it's a fascinating topic because I'm always wondering how that works, especially me being in Romania where the church is very, very traditional, which means comes as well very strong beliefs about certain topics, especially when we talk about sexuality, maybe more than others. I'd love to hear what makes the difference in some of these organizations that were maybe a bit more advanced and think differently already.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and thank you for that. And like I should say, the churches that I have been in, and so because you're right, like the church, as we talk about the whole thing, if you talk about the whole Christian denomination church, Catholic, Protestant, Lutheran, Methodist, like everybody in, like it is not diverse. And like so much has been written about that like the church is the most segregated organization in the world, right? And absolutely, especially here in America, with racial tension, and the church has been in America, the church has been an instrument and a force for racism and for division, and it's probably the original, like, right? I mean, so many studies go back to the post Civil War in America and the reconstitution of like, how will we engage together, specifically the white community and black community. And the white community was like, nope, black community, you're not welcome here. And so we see that long history in the church specifically. And now, as you say, with it around LGBTQIA issues, with folks, the church is extremely judgmental and condemning. And so like, but you can find little pockets of churches and little organizations that are on the forefront. And so that's what I was part of. I was part of those little pockets and forefronts, and being in that space. So like for me, my experience was I'm in this little group of churches that want that and are pushing for that and really inclusive. And now you have the full force and the weight of the tradition of 2,000 years of Christianity sort of pushing back on that. And so like, that's where that's my leadership experience. That's where I became a leader. So you have this little pocket of inclusion, diversity, committed to justice, and then this massive traditional organization that doesn't want that and sees that as a threat, pushing back and trying to destroy you.
Very, very interesting. I think for me, what it shows as well is that, because I imagine when you're in a group where you don't feel like you belong in the church, for example, or elsewhere, it's this hope that actually there are some groups that don't think like that are a bit more progressive, that really would welcome you and you would feel like you belong. I think it helps as well seeing how you can move forward and what's the word I'm looking for, like kind of combine different things that are important to you rather than actually wanting to belong in a group where you're not allowed to, or you're not giving the possibility to at all. I think it's wonderful to see that.
Yeah. And so like absolutely. So for me, it was a weird kind of dynamic. So I was all about creating belonging for people who didn't have any belonging, right? Like they've been pushed out of other churches. So I'm here like, okay, in our place, you have a space, and we're going to create a whole system where you have belonging. But on the same hand, like I'm sort of in the middle, like I'm creating belonging on this side, but on the other side, I'm being rejected by my colleagues, right? So like all of my colleagues and my other professionals are like, we don't want to deal with you. We don't like what you're doing. We disagree with you. You're wrong. And so I was sort of in the middle of this space, creating belonging, but not belonging, and creating belonging, but not belonging. So that's a kind of a hard space to be in, and but so valuable.
And so going back a little bit to what we talked about before. So you mentioned what it was like 20 years ago until now. How do you see the future of belonging in organizations, whether it is that part of the church that isn't necessarily there, or the corporate environment? How do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, I think like right now, and I'll speak for the corporate environment, right? I think COVID has changed a lot of things in our world. And I'll frame it in this way, because I think that gives us a good picture of where the future is heading. When COVID first hit, we weren't ready for it. We had never experienced anything like this before. And I mean, like our reaction to it, right? Like we got the world got shut down. Like everybody, like you can't go out, you can't interact anymore. And so like, so I study the brain a lot. I love the brain. Like, how is the brain working in this situation? And so here we are, we're doing life, and now we get a complete uncertainty and unknown. And the brain hates uncertainty, hates it, and will fight against it. And so like, okay, now we're shut down, we're isolated, we don't have community, we're working from home, our kids are home. And also, so we're worried about our health. Are we going to get sick? Are we going to die? We're people around us are getting sick. We're losing people that we care about. So we are in the midst of this tornado of stress and uncertainty for 2 years. And so like what we know about the brain is when we go through these really uncertain and stressful times, the brain is going to pursue one thing: safety. And so like we have been in this pursuit right now, in the last 6 months and the last year of psychological safety. And we are going to leave everything Our brain's just going to be like, you got to get out of whatever's not safe. Get out of it, get out of it, get out of it. We don't always know that our brain's doing this, but we do the thing that the brain wants us to do. So, the great resignation or the great reshuffling or whatever we call it here of employees switching jobs, quitting jobs, family members cutting off family relationships that they'd had before, that like we're going to cut off everything that's not safe. And so I think this really applies to the future. Like, where are we going in the future? We need safety. And so for the next 5 years, at least, everything's going to be a pursuit of who provides me safety. And that's in so many elements, right? Psychological, emotional, physical safety, future security safety. And so this changes leadership. Now people like business leadership, corporate leadership can't just, we're finding like, okay, well, we'll just pay you more. And we'll have a great job that pays you a lot. That's not enough. And we're seeing stat after stat after stat. People aren't taking the jobs that just pay a lot. They're leaving jobs that pay a lot. They're moving to jobs that will pay less, actually, but you have a better working environment. You're less stressed and you feel like you belong. You feel safe in this space. And so like what I tell leaders right now is like the leaders that can provide safety for their people will be the leaders that thrive. People are just going to like flock to you. They're going to be like, that one over there, that one makes me safe. They have emotional intelligence. They're about empowering me. They're about serving me. They're providing the safety that I need. We're going to go to that person. Mm-hmm. And so like that is changing. Like that wasn't the case a couple years ago, 5 years ago. But now everything about leadership for the short term, for the next 5 to 10 years, I think, is going to be like, how are you creating safety for your people? And you will thrive if you do that. And if you don't do that, you're going to struggle.
And so how do you support organizations and leaders achieve that? I think, I imagine it's not an easy process. It doesn't change from one day to another. But what are some of the things that you work on with them?
Yeah, for me, what I really work on is that sort of mindset shift of like, how am I thinking about how am I leading, right? How am I thinking about my leadership capacity right now? And so the old way was I think about basically extracting the resources from my employees and the earth and the situation in order to make profit for my company. And the more profit I can make, the more I will rise, the more successful I will be. And in our corporate worlds, we promote managers who can make profit. And that's what we've done. The people that get promoted are the ones that make profit for the company. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is, as I come along and I'm like, okay, that doesn't work anymore in our world. And so like I'm going to teach you here are the principles that we want to talk about, that I want to get into your brain about how to be successful in the future of business leadership. And they're empowering your employees, empowering your people. It is about supporting your people. We talk about the golden rule, right? The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do to you. Mm-hmm. But that's a wrong rule, because it puts me at the center and assumes you want what I want in your life. Yep. So we talk about the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they want done to them. So I need to treat you like you want to be treated. And I need to talk to you like you want to be talked to. And I need to respect you like you want to be respected. So that means I got to do some work. I got to do some work. I got to know what you want. I got to know how you want to be communicated with. And so like, okay, we shift that. Then we're talking about providing purpose for our employees. So mm-hmm. people want to work in a place that's doing something socially good, right? And we all know that corporate can't do everything good, and we're going to have to make choices, but we want to work for what we feel good about. And so, and then we want connection with other people. So how are our leaders providing connection with other folks? So I work on these principles with leaders and help them understand that the keys within each one of them, and really focus on, instead of being a corporate centered leader, you are an employee centered leader. And that's where it really all boils down to.
It's very interesting, actually, because it is definitely indeed a mindset switch at that point. Mm-hmm. But what I was wondering is, how do you bring that down from the organization to the individuals? Because ultimately, the individuals are what is the ones who are going to create that environment. I mean, you can have a lot of principles, you can have a lot of values behind, but if the employees are not putting it into practice, it's not going to move forward, I imagine.
Yeah. And so what I do, I frame everything that I talk about in self-interest of like, this is good for you and it's going to help you succeed. And I'm going to show you why. And I show people why. Like, this is science. There's this great book called The Power Paradox by Dr. Keltner. And he studied power. He studies power and dynamics of power. And at PhD at Berkeley, a PhD. And so his conclusion is this: he wrote a whole book on it. The people who empower others, the people that genuinely help other people succeed in their life, are the ones that rise and gain power in society. And he did all these studies and all these examples of, you'll find these people that do this and they're going to rise. And so, like, this is the way that I frame it. You help empower other people and you will gain the benefit from that. People will trust you more. They will like you more. You will be promoted. You will gain people's allegiances. You will gain people's following. People will want to work with you. People will want to be around you because they know that you will help them succeed. And so you helping them succeed will help you succeed. They'll help you succeed, and in that sense. And so I always frame it in the self-interest, like, this is good for you.
And it's a very good point, and I think that applies to wider than just belonging, and we talk about it in diversity, equity, inclusion as well. I think the bringing it back to the individual and what's the benefit for me ultimately is what is going to make the difference, because we hear out there a lot of benefits for the organization. You're going to be more productive, you're going to be more performant, you're going to be this and that, but ultimately, if my organization is making a few more billions and I don't get anything out of it, what's the point for me? And it's not just about money. It's I'm talking money here, but I think ultimately, if I don't get what's in it for me, I have probably. I mean, you mentioned about the pandemic and COVID and all the things that we're looking for, that safety. If I don't get something out of it, I will do what is more important to me as an individual. So I think it's an amazing approach to look at it like this. And one thing I'm always interested in as well, because I find it extremely difficult, and you mentioned about belonging is a feeling. It's very difficult to measure. So how do you really measure whether what you're doing is actually having a positive impact on the people around?
Yeah, well, measurements go like this, right? So they ask, how many sick days are people taking? And so, like, how many sick days were they taking? How many are they taking? Because sick days aren't just about people being sick. They're also about people like, I don't want to work. And so I'm going to be sicker more. But also about the stress that the job is putting on them. Stress causes sickness. And that we know that mental sickness, physical sickness. And so, like, okay, where were your sick days? Where are your sick days now? Right. And so you can also measure engagement. And so how are folks being engaged? You know, one of the questions I ask employees when I do a survey, because I often do surveys, a belonging audit, and so I have some pieces of if you had enough money and could quit your job tomorrow, would you quit it without any consequence? Would you quit this job? If you didn't have to worry about money for 6 months, would you quit this job? And okay, that really begins to kind of, that seems like a start question. And everybody would be like, yes, I would quit. Of course I would quit. No, that's not the case. People want to work. People want a job, but people want a job that they want to work at, right? And so, like, that's a really, if I do this belonging audit and 80% of your employees say, yes, I would quit tomorrow. I would quit this job tomorrow if I could. And if that's 80% of your employees, you've got a problem, and your problem's pretty deep. People don't want to work there. And they're feeling stressed. So you have measurement tools that we can begin to measure, but they're not always in terms of profit loss. So we have to begin to think about like human emotion and how people think and how people are thinking about your job. Did you want to come to work on Monday? Okay, that's people sometimes people dread, or put on a scale. How did on a scale from 1 to 5, what was your angst on Sunday night thinking about you got to go back to work on Monday morning?
Yep.
And so like that's a big thing, right? If you are on Sunday night, if you're like, oh my gosh, I got to go to work again, like that, you don't belong. You don't have a sense of belonging in that place because you hate it and you hate your people. You don't want to work with the people that you're working with.
And we hear that so much, actually. So many people like this on Sunday will probably be thinking like this. And and still they don't necessarily always do something about it, which I think then it becomes a responsibility of the organization to make sure, how do I change that to make sure that they want to come on Monday morning? Because they're going to spend quite a bit of time of their life in that organization.
Yes, you're going to spend more time at work than you do with your children, than you do raising your children. Yep. And like, wow, like, and I think that's the sort of, when I talk to executives that have an old mindset, and we're trying to get them into the new mindset. So often they're like, well, we're paying them. They should come to work. We're paying them, like, why don't they want to work? People don't want to work, blah, 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 blah. The Generation Z, they don't want to work. They don't want to work 40 hours a week. We wanted to work when I was 25, but like, whoa. Like, have a little respect for them. They're leaving their children. They're giving their 1-year-old to daycare so that they can come work for you. Yep. They spend more time with you than they do their 1-year-old infant. And so like, let's have a little respect for people, right? Because this is a really big deal. People are giving up so much of their life in order to make your company profitable. So, so stepping back a little bit and understanding the human toll that work can take on people, I think is also part of that mindset.
Oh, definitely. And one thing I wanted to ask you, actually, because we talked about the corporate environment and things that can be done at that level, but if I bring it back to the individual, so let's say me in an organization, and I want people around me to feel that they belong more than they do at the moment. What are some of these kind of concrete things that I can do to make that happen?
Yeah, I think it's, to me, they're really simple. And if you're a part of an organization, you want people to feel like they belong around you. You want to be kind of that belonging person. I think you just ask people, how are you? And like, not only just, because we're just going to say, like, oh, I'm fine. How was your weekend? Oh, it was fine. But ask people, get to know them just a little bit. This doesn't take long, right? What do you really care about in life? Do you have children? Do you have pets? Do you have a spouse? Are you part of something that you really are passionate about? Like, tell me a little bit about your life. And then you can ask specific questions. Asking people specific questions is so good. Of like, how's your dog doing? And if like they love their pet, how's your dog? And they'll be like, oh my gosh, let me show you a picture. Or like, if you knew, like, my daughter loves theater. And if I go to work, she's 14 years old. She's in theater. She loves it. She was in a play last semester. She was Lucy in Charlie Brown, right? And if I would have gone to work and my boss would have said, how did your daughter's play go this weekend? Like, wow, like, they care about me. Like, that means so much. People, and that's all it takes. Literally 2 minutes. Walk to the car. I mean, you're 5:00, you're off work. Walk to the car with somebody and just ask them, like, how you doing? Like, I was just thinking about you, wondering, I was sending you some good vibes. You need help with anything, or like, what's going good? What's really hard right now? Just, I think, like, it's just really about human connection, and we need more of that. And so, like, we kind of get into the workplace, and managers create this hierarchy, right? And managers, they're like, you got those reports? When are those reports going to be here? First thing on Monday morning, like, okay, I need those reports by 3:00. Like, hold on, like, just hold on a minute. Why don't you just make a connection with that person? Just 2 minutes, make a connection. You do that, and they're going to be so much more profitable. I mean, productive, and they're going to be happier. You're going to be happier. Just make a connection. And so that's what I tell people: just make a connection.
And it's interesting you're saying that, because there's a lot of research actually showing that creating that connection about who you are as an individual actually builds a lot of that trust.
Yeah.
But naturally, I think as individuals, we focus on the what rather than focusing on the who, and it makes a huge difference. It made me think actually about one of the jobs I was in a few years ago, and our CEO would be exactly like that. So we'd come from the UK to Romania, and he would know every single person in the organization, and he would know something about them. And I was always very impressed. Exactly. I mean, the face you were making a few minutes ago was exactly that, live every single time. Even just not even what he would ask me, because we were quite close and we knew each other, but what he would ask other people around. And I'm like, I work with these people day in, day out, and there are things you know about them that I don't even know. He was a magician for that. He was really, really good. And it was really impressive. But it did make the difference, indeed. Every single employee in the company was valuing him at a very different level.
Yes, absolutely. And so they want to work for, you want to work for people like that, right? And you want to do good for people like that. And you want to work your best for people like that. And then we get a sense of like, they care about me. And I think like that's what we want. We want to feel cared for. And I think, you know, we're all kids in our brains. And so we all want those things, same things we wanted when we were 6 years old. We want to be cared for. So just care about people.
No, definitely. And so I asked you the question about, okay, what can I do to make the others feel like they belong? But I'm sure you've encountered as well a lot of people that told you, well, I don't feel like I belong here. What are some of the things that you advise them that they could do, or what could help them either feel like they belong more in that organization, or what would be the best path forward for them to be able to feel that sense of belonging?
Yeah, here is like, this is a fantastic question. And so there's some debate about how to do that, right? So if you have an individual person, and so is it their responsibility to create belonging if they don't feel belonging, or is it other people's responsibility to help create belonging for them? And so I am on the side of it's other people's responsibility to help create belonging for that person who doesn't feel belonging, that they shouldn't, if they're the victim of this organization, and I use this term loosely, like victim, right? If they're feeling mishandled by the organization or those around them, the responsibility should not be on them then to fix the problem, because that's sort of victim blaming a little bit in my mind. And so like, if I know somebody, what I do is really just ask questions. If I know somebody who doesn't feel belonging, I don't put any responsibility on them. I just ask them questions like, okay, well, can you tell me an interaction that really left you hurt, or that was painful for you? Are there certain coworkers that you just like, you get really stressed when you're around? And so I ask them the questions to help them kind of get it out, and almost a little bit like counseling in some ways, just like, okay, get this out. And now we can deal with it, because lots of times people just have so many stuffed up feelings inside of themselves that's really blocking them from seeing the good, right? Like we had a couple really bad experiences, and now we can't even see the good anymore. And it's impossible to see the good until we deal with the trapped feelings that are blocking the good inside of us. And so I really just ask them questions, help them to bring that to the surface, and then work with the leaders of the organization and the other coworkers, not to directly be like, well, Nancy doesn't feel like she belongs, so Bob, you need to reach out to Nancy. Like, no, I don't do that, right? But helping people, like, how do we use the rest of the people around them to give them the mindset where they are going to reach out without knowing that this person doesn't feel belonging, but now they're going to reach out because that's our mindset's shifting.
And I imagine anyway, when you have someone like this that doesn't feel like they necessarily belong, they're probably not alone in that.
That's right.
In that context and in that company. So ultimately, you're not just helping them; you're helping the wider organization move forward
Yes.
as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all these things already. But one question I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned about it at the beginning, and it's about the village mindset. So that's
Yes.
the book that is coming out today.
Mm-hmm.
Who is it for? What can we learn from the book?
Yeah, really, the book is birthed out of my desire to see business do good, right? Do good for the world, to be a force for good in the world and create flourishing for our people, not only our employees, but our communities. And so I believe that, as someone who worked in the church and nonprofit for a long, long time, and we think like, okay, well, those social organizations are supposed to be the organizations that really help save humanity, right? And like, as someone who's been inside of that, I really see they're not. They're not going to do that. They're not designed to do that. They're designed to care. They're to care about people's emotions, right? But business has the power. Business can change the world. Business has all the power in the world. They can change things. And so, like, how then do we begin to think about business as a force for good in the world? And so that's really where this book is birthed out of, and taking that drive, that desire, my experience, and really giving it to leaders within organizations. So executive leaders, managers, HR leaders. That's who it's really written for, is for the executive leaders in organizations. But this is great for everybody, for emerging leaders, for folks who want to help be facilitators of belonging, for people who want to expand their influence. So really, it's written for the executive leaders, but this is so good. Like, the research in here is so good and so solid. It's all based in science and the science of compassion, because I believe compassion is a biological superpower for us. Like, we are literally evolutionarily and biologically wired to operate in compassion, and everybody works better when we operate in compassion. People are happier, they're healthier, they communicate better when we're operating in compassion. And so, like, that's really the heart of it, and taking these principles, because I believe, it's called the village mindset, because we grew up in our evolution in villages. And so, like, our brain knows a village, right? In a village, we feel safe. We feel like we belong to something. And a lot of times I hear corporate folks say, well, we're a family. I'm like, no, your company is not a family, right? If you laid off that employee, are you going to let them live at your house for 3 months until they find another job? Like, no, you're not a family. But you can be a village, right? And so, like, creating this sense that we're all part of this village, and sometimes people leave and sometimes people come back, and whatever it is, we're going to be about empowering our people, that we're going to be about helping each other, because, like, when we help individuals within the village grows and the village thrives. And so, like, that's really the mindset that I want to help people capture.
I love the image. It's a beautiful image to have, and it's very interesting indeed how you positioned it. I never thought about it like that, and yeah, love it.
That's great. Thank you so much.
And so, what my last question I wanted to ask you is, what is one thing that you want to leave our listeners with? One thing that is very important to you that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think is like we're so tired right now. And we've just been through a hard time, and the whole world, everybody in the world has been through a hard time, and our world feels like sometimes it's coming apart at the seams, and our brains so often are in stress brain, and we're just like fight or flight or freeze, because we have so much stress around us. But there's an answer, and the answer is built into our biology, and the answer is really compassion. And when we do good, when we have a compassionate act, or even a compassionate thought about somebody else, positive hormones are released from our brain down our vagus nerve into our heart and our lungs and our digestive system and our liver and our mouth, and we are happier and we're healthier, we're less stressed, and we're better leaders and better people. We're our truest self when we're operating in compassion. And so, like, if there's anything I want people to hear, it's that, of like, let's capture the power of compassion, because it may just be the biological wiring to help us save humanity from ourselves.
It's a beautiful word to finish with, and I'm glad you shared that. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on here. This was fantastic.
It was a pleasure, and actually, I just realized that it was not actually my last question, because
Okay,
I need
great.
to ask you as well. What's the best way to reach out to you if anyone wants to connect with you in the future? How can they
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah, really, my website is the best place. It's thevillagemindset.com. And so thevillagemindset.com, you can go on there, and then my email's on there. You can reach me and reach out to me.
Wonderful. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being part of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. It was a pleasure having you. I learned a lot personally, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So thank you so much for sharing all these words of wisdom. And I hope we'll continue the conversation as well.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, for all that you do. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. We'd love to hear from you. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.